Tech here, welcome to the channel. If you're looking to increase your storage by upgrading your existing hard drive to a new solid-state drive, and you don't want to go through the process of backing up all your files, reinstalling Windows, and all your applications, then this is the video for you. Now, with my years of experience working in the technology space, I'd be remiss if I didn't stress the importance of backing up your files. The typical user can get by with a weekly or monthly backup cadence, but we'll leave that for another video. Today, I'll be providing you with a step-by-step walkthrough of the cloning process using a few different utilities. And don't worry, the process is not as difficult as you may think. The majority of these applications are pretty easy to use, with one being a little more for the technically inclined. Also, if you just bought a new SSD or you're doing some research prior to buying one, this may help you make an informed decision on what drives to consider or what steps you may take next. Some may not be aware of this, but many of the popular hard drive OEMs provide the option for you to download a free cloning utility. For example, OEM versions of Acronis True Image are available for Western Digital drives and for drives from Crucial, Kingston, SanDisk, and a few others as well. I'll post a full list in the description below. And Samsung bundles the Samsung Magician utility for cloning with their drives. So then what do you do if you don't buy a drive from one of those manufacturers? If you're in that camp, then basically there are two free options. If anyone knows of any others, please leave them in the comments below. But DiskGenius and Clonezilla Live are open source utilities that can be used with drives that don't provide a utility to assist with cloning. Like this Lexar 4TB NVMe drive, which I'll be using to upgrade my ASUS ZenBook 14X. So in this video, we'll walk through the following cloning utilities: Acronis True Image, Samsung Magician, DiskGenius, and Clonezilla Live. Years back, you could find a number of free options online. But every year, it seems like one of these applications moves the cloning feature behind a paywall. So I'm only covering those that I tested, which are still free as of recording in 2025. But before we dive in, here are a couple of things you may need first. First, if you don't have one already, you'll need a toolkit. Something like this, or this, nothing too expensive. Next, you may also need an external enclosure, either an NVMe enclosure, something like these from Ugreen and SSK, or a 2.5-inch SATA SSD enclosure if you're on older hardware and you're working with 2.5-inch SATA slots in your machine. Both of these NVMe enclosures are listed as toolless, but the Ugreen is the true toolless option of the two. There are a bunch of other options on Amazon. I'll leave links with different choices for toolkits and external enclosures for you below. If your laptop or desktop has an additional NVMe slot or an additional SATA connection, then you won't need an external enclosure. So make sure you check, because you can just use that additional slot for the cloning process. So let's get started. I've broken things up into chapters so you can just jump to the section that covers the utility you're interested in learning more about. First up, let's walk through Acronis True Image. Before I get started with Acronis, in my case, I need to install the NVMe drive. I'm going to be using one of the NVMe enclosures I showed you earlier. This is the one from Ugreen. It's completely toolless, simple and easy to use. There's a button at the back here. Press it in, it slides open, and it actually comes with some thermal pads. The faster the NVMe drive, the more heat it generates. So a thermal pad in an NVMe enclosure is helpful as it helps the heat dissipate and prevents throttling during use. I'll be using the Western Digital Black SN770 for the Acronis tutorial. Remember, you can follow this same tutorial if you have a drive from Crucial, SanDisk, PNY, and the others I've listed in the description below. Installing it in the enclosure is real easy. You see the notch? The notch has to align with the notch in the enclosure. Once aligned, slide the drive in fully. Then secure the drive with the rubber nub at the end. Once secured, place the thermal pad on top. slide the cover tray back on the enclosure and get it ready to connect to your machine. Once connected, it should detect your drive and you're ready to launch the Acronis True Image application. Let's walk through Acronis True Image. But in order to do that, we need to download the application. Since we're using Windows, we're downloading Acronis for Windows. I'll leave the direct download link in the description below. After installation, we'll launch Acronis True Image. Once launched, you'll be taken to the Acronis True Image main screen. On the left menu pane, click Tools, then click Clone Disk. Choose Clone Mode, select Automatic. This will ensure that the existing partitions from your source drive will be resized to fit your new target drive. So make sure to leave it on automatic. This will allow you to be able to utilize the full size of your new larger drive. Next, you'll select the source drive from the list of drives in your machine. If you have more than 2 drives in your machine, make sure you select your correct drive. Next, you'll select the target hard drive, which will be the new drive. Again, if you have more than 2 drives in your machine, please make sure you're selecting the correct drive. Leave everything as it is, select Next. Then select OK to confirm deletion of all the partitions. In most cases, if you have a new drive, there will be no existing partitions. But since I've used this drive for testing before, it sees the partitions that I've used when testing this drive. So I'm gonna hit OK, confirm deletion of all the partitions so that we can proceed with the cloning process. Next, you're gonna select the required cloning method. In our case, we're looking to clone our operating system drive because we want to replace that drive on our machine. So you're gonna leave it on to replace a disk on this machine cloned with bootable OS. You have 2 other options you can choose to use on another machine, which is not what we're doing in this tutorial. And we have the option just to clone it as a data disk. So we'll leave it on to replace a disk on this machine and click Next. Now we're on the summary page. This is gonna be your last chance to confirm that you have the correct drive selected. Once you've confirmed that you've selected both the correct source and target drive, click Proceed. Now Acronis will begin the cloning process. So we're gonna jump through to the end of the process. And you see here, the disk was cloned successfully. We're gonna shut down the computer now, swap drives, and then boot the machine back up. For this Acronis tutorial, I'll be upgrading my wife's HP Envy X360. For anyone with the same laptop, you'll see that this process is not that difficult. First, you'll need to remove 6 screws in order to remove the back cover. There are 2 T5 screws on the bottom, and then 4 small Phillips screws under the rubber feet. You'll need to pry up each corner of the rubber strips to expose the screws for removal. Once you've removed all the screws, you'll need to use a pry tool to detach the back cover from your laptop. Work the pry tool all around the edges of the laptop until you've released all the clips. Now you can remove the back cover. On the bottom right under the metal plate is where your NVMe drive is. Remove the small Phillips screw, lift the plate, and you can easily remove your old NVMe drive. Next, we'll have to remove your new drive from the external enclosure. When installing the drive, remember to make sure the notches align and the drive easily slides in. Resecure the metal plate, get that cover back on, snap it back in place. Now time to boot up so we can verify that the cloning process completed successfully. All right, back up and running. Here we're in File Explorer and you can see my C drive is now the new Western Digital SN770 with full 2 terabytes of space available to me. If you have any questions or if you run into any issues, please leave them in the comment section below. Let's get into the Samsung Magician cloning tutorial. If you're leaning towards upgrading to a Samsung drive, you really can't go wrong. They have some great new drives like their 990 Pro, which I recently used in a gaming PC build for a client. And the benchmarks on Samsung's new 9100 series Gen 5 NVMe drives look great. So seeing how simple the cloning process is with Samsung Magician could be a deciding factor for you. For this tutorial, I'll be using a 970 EVO, a drive I already had on hand, which will be perfect for the walkthrough. Before getting started, we'll get the NVMe drive installed in the trusty Ugreen external enclosure. It's pretty quick and simple. Once installed and connected to your computer, you're ready to launch the Samsung Magician utility. I'll leave direct download links in the description below. Here we go. We got the Samsung Magician up and running. If you already have your drive connected via your external enclosure or have it installed in an extra NVMe slot on your motherboard, then Samsung Magician should automatically detect the drive. But if you connect the drive after launching the application, just click on the refresh button and you should see your new drive populate up here alongside your existing drive. As you can see, the Samsung Magician utility is feature-rich, providing you with tools under the drive management section for drive maintenance, firmware updates, as well as performance optimizations. But we're focused on the cloning process in this tutorial, so we'll jump down to the data management section and click on data migration. This is where we begin the cloning process. One thing to be aware of, those of you with encrypted drives may see this screen when clicking on data migration. Encrypted source drives cannot be replicated. In this instance, you'll have to turn off device encryption on your machine. To do this, go to your start menu and type encryption and click on device encryption settings. Now you can turn off device encryption. Once you completed cloning and switch to the new drive, you can turn device encryption back on. All right, we can get back to cloning. First, we must choose our source and target drives. If you only have 2 drives, then the application should have already selected your existing drive as the source drive. For the target drive, use the drop-down arrow next to the selected drive to choose your Samsung drive. Next, click Start and confirm that you'll be okay with all files being deleted on the target drive. Specifically, if you're using a drive that's been used previously, as is my case. But for most of you, this will be a new drive, so there's nothing to be concerned about here. Next, click OK, and cloning will begin. The progress bar below will calculate how long the process will take. For time's sake, we'll skip ahead to the end of the process. The cloning process has completed successfully. Now we can shut down our machine, swap drives, and get the system booted back up. For this Samsung Magician tutorial, I'm using a Lenovo IdeaPad Slim 7i Pro, also known in other regions as the Yoga Slim 7i Pro. I'll speed through the NVMe SSD swap so we can confirm that the cloning process was indeed a success. All right, the machine has successfully booted up, and I can confirm it is now running on the Samsung NVMe drive. So there you have it. Cloning with Samsung Magician is a pretty straightforward process. If you have any questions or run into any issues, please leave them in the comment section below. For those of you who purchased the drive that didn't come with any cloning utility to help you transition over to the new drive, DiskGenius is probably the easiest of the free open source options. I'm going to leave a link to the download below. Once you have it downloaded and installed, it's not difficult to use at all. But I'm going to walk you through the steps so you can easily get transitioned over to your new drive. First, we need to connect the new drive to the computer. I'm using a Lexar 4TB NM790, and in my case, I'll be connecting the drive via an external NVMe enclosure. Remember, if you're using a desktop or laptop with an additional NVMe slot, you can also connect the drive that way. So I'll quickly install it in my Ugreen enclosure, and then I can connect it to my laptop. Now that it's connected, it's time to run DiskGenius. Once launched, on the left side, DiskGenius lists all the hard drives connected to your machine. You should see your OS partition highlighted. Since our goal is to clone our main hard drive, we need to do what DiskGenius calls an OS migration. So if you look at the top toolbar, right next to the DiskGenius banner, there's an OS migration icon. Once selected, you'll need to choose your system partition. If you have more than 2 drives connected to your machine, make sure you select the correct drive. Next, you'll select the target drive. Again, make sure you're selecting the correct drive. In my case, it will be the Lexar 4TB drive. Next, you may see a warning dialog regarding all files and partitions on target disks being overwritten. In my instance, due to testing on this drive, it sees previous files and partitions. But in your instance, you may be using a new drive. Click OK to move forward to the next step. Now we're in System Migration Settings. This is where you'll need to make sure that you adjust the partition size on your target drive. You'll need to drag the partition all the way to the right so you can utilize the full size of your target drive. If you leave it as is, it will maintain the current partition size and you won't be able to use all the available space on your new, larger drive. Next, click Start and hit OK to move along to the next step. Now, DiskGenius gives you two cloning methods to choose from: hot migration and reboot to WinPE. I'm going to choose hot migration here so that Windows doesn't need to reboot and perform the cloning process outside the Windows environment. I've done it both ways and I haven't noticed a difference either way. So you can click hot migration to begin the cloning process. You'll now see the estimated time of completion in the progress bar below. For time's sake, we'll jump ahead to the end of the process. The cloning process has completed successfully. Now, let's shut down, swap drives, and get the computer back up and running. I'm upgrading my ASUS ZenBook 14X, another laptop that's easy to upgrade. I'll speed through the SSD swap so we can confirm that the cloning process was indeed completed successfully. We're back up. The laptop has booted without issue. DiskGenius is a great free open source option. As you can see here, we're up and running on the Lexar 4TB drive. If you have any comments or questions, or if you run into any issues, please leave them in the comment section below. The number of free cloning utility options are pretty slim. As of recording, Clonezilla Live and DiskGenius are the two truly free open source options out there. But Clonezilla Live is a Linux-based cloning utility that has been around for a while and is still a solid option, especially if you tried DiskGenius and had no luck. You may want to try this one before paying for a different option. Sure, it may not be quite as user-friendly as DiskGenius, but it gets the job done. Let's walk through the process and I'll try to make it as easy to follow as possible. First, as we did in the other tutorials, you must connect your SSD to your machine. Either you'll install it using an available NVMe or SATA slot on your motherboard, or you will do as I'm doing here, connecting my 4TB Lexar NVMe drive via this SSK external enclosure. Once you have it all set, it's time to get the Clonezilla application ready to go. As I said, Clonezilla is a Linux-based tool, so it doesn't run in a Windows environment. You'll have to install it on either CD, DVD, USB flash drive, or an external USB hard drive. I'll run through setting it up on a USB flash drive now. Depending on the OS and the age of your machine will determine the method used to set up the bootable USB flash drive. The machine I'm using for the walkthrough is the ZenBook 14X, which is a newer laptop that uses the UEFI boot mode method. So I will follow that setup method. They have all the installation steps on their website, but I'll quickly walk through them for you. I have my USB flash drive here. We'll need to make sure the drive is set up with a fat partition. If you're not sure how to do this, let's go through that right now. In order to set up the correct partition on your flash drive, if you're on a Windows machine, we'll have to go to Disk Management. If you're on a Mac or another machine, please follow the Disk Management utility for that OS. Let's plug in your USB flash drive. Then we're gonna go to the Start menu and start typing in Disk Management. And you'll see the best match on the top will be Create and Format Hard Disk Partitions. Click on that and it will bring us to the Disk Management tool. All right, now we'll see all the disks detected in your machine by Disk Management. Disk 0 is my system hard drive. Disk 1 is the USB flash drive. As you see here, in my case, it says 28.91 gigs unallocated. So I need to create a fat partition, and per the instructions on the website, it needs to be at least 500 megabytes. Now this is a 32 gig USB flash drive, and just to be safe, I'll create a 1 gig FAT partition, and I'll have the remaining space an NTFS partition. So right click on the unallocated space and create a new simple volume. Click next. Now, this is 1000 megabytes. Next, we can assign a drive letter. Use a drive letter that's not already in use. For the file system, we'll choose FAT32. In the instructions, it says FAT16 or FAT32. So we'll use FAT32. And for the volume label, just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll name it Clonezilla. You can select Perform a Quick Format and hit Next. Then click Finish. All right, partition has been created, and now I'll format the remaining space using NTFS. There we go. Now we can move forward with the rest of the process. Let me close out disk management, and we'll proceed with downloading the appropriate files. Since we have to follow the steps for the UEFI mode, it requires that we download the AMD 64 version. Since it is a zip file, we're gonna have to unzip it. If you're in Windows, you can right click and hit Extract All. It's gonna create a folder of the same name and automatically extract the files to that folder. Just click Extract. Here we go. Now, the files here in this extracted folder have to be just copied over directly to that FAT32 partition. I'll go into the Clonezilla partition and paste it in there. All right, now that we have that completed, we're ready to run Clonezilla live. Time to restart and set the PC to boot from the flash drive. You'll have to go into the boot menu to change the boot device to the USB flash drive. If you have an ASUS ZenBook like myself, then as soon as you power on the machine, press and hold the escape key to enter the boot menu and change the boot device to your USB flash drive. Remember to have your new drive connected via the external enclosure or have it installed on an extra NVMe or SATA slot on your motherboard prior to booting with Clonezilla. And it's gonna start booting and it's gonna look for your USB drive. Nice, so it's working. Now you're gonna select the correct mode for your machine. So what I'm gonna choose is the VGA 800 by 600 option with large font. This should make it reasonable to read. Your results may vary depending on the machine and the display you're using when you run this application. All right, now we're in. Now we're gonna choose a language. Choose the language that's best suited for you. For me, that would be English. We choose the default keyboard layout. Choose Start Clonezilla. You'll select the second option, device to device. Work directly from a disk or partition to another disk or partition. Click on that, choose beginner, then make sure to click disk to local disk to local disk clone. Make sure you're choosing the correct source disk. Choose your target disk. That may show up as SDB or HDB, or you may see the manufacturer of the drive like we do in my case. Select that. Choose to skip checking, repairing source file system. In our instance, we want to clone the old drive to the new drive, but we want access to all the space, that new storage space on the new drive. So we're going to select K1, create partition table proportionally. Quick note, if your drive is BitLocker encrypted, this step will not work. So make sure to follow the steps I showed you earlier on how to turn off BitLocker encryption on your drive. Next, choose reboot, shutdown, etc. when everything is finished. Clonezilla will ask for confirmation a couple of times prior to beginning the cloning process. Hit Y and enter to confirm each time so you can move forward with the process. Here we go. The process has begun. In no time, we'll be ready to swap in the new drive and get things going. The cloning has completed successfully. Now, press enter, power off, so we can swap drives and get booted up on the new Lexar drive. Then we can confirm if we have access to the full 4 terabytes of storage. Ah, success. All 4 terabytes, ready to go. Like I said, Clonezilla Live is another great tool. It may not be quite as simple as DiskGenius, but it gets the job done. If you have any questions, or if you've run into any issues during your cloning process, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see how I can help. All right, now that we've gone through all the applications, the easiest way to go would be to take a look at the SSD offerings from Samsung, Western Digital, Crucial, and the others that offer free downloadable apps for the cloning process. Acronis True Image and Samsung Magician are simple to use, convenient options. Now, if you end up deciding on other drive options, you still have solid cloning utilities to choose from, like DiskGenius and Clonezilla Live. Let me know your thoughts and which options you would choose in the comments below. If you found this tutorial helpful, please smash that like, subscribe, and notification icon to be notified when we drop another tutorial. The support is greatly appreciated. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions about any of the utilities I went over, or if there are any you thought I left out, please let me know and I'll see if I can cover them in a future video. Thanks for watching, and please remember, spread love, positivity, and try to be helpful to someone in this world today. If you're interested in more helpful content from me, please check out this next video.